everybody. Welcome to another episode. I'm Mike Monticello.
I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
I'm Michael Crossan.
And today isn't just another episode. This is our end of year 2023 wrap-up extravaganza, where we take a look back at the bigger moments that happened here at the Consumer Reports Auto Test Center, as well as give our picks for our favorite vehicles we tested this year and our least favorite vehicles we tested this year. So let's start, Mike Crossan, with just some stats. I mean, what we do here is we test vehicles, right? That's our main thing. So let's give us some stats on how many vehicles we tested, the different types, the variety.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start off by saying right now we actually have more test cars than I think we've ever had in history. We have 94 cars in total.
Wow. On hand at the site.
On hand. And that includes tire test cars and some down in child seats as well. So it's a ton of cars. The breakout on that, if my math here is correct, we have 27 EVs. We have 12 plug-in hybrid vehicles. We have 18 just regular standard hybrids. And then the remainder, which should be 27 cars, are just gasoline powered vehicles.
Right.
So
Good
that's kind of the breakout.
gasoline cars.
Yeah, good old
Remember those?
Back in the day.
And I did the math on this one too for all 94 cars. The total fleet mileage as of yesterday is 732,223 miles.
Wow.
Right.
On all those cars. So a bunch of miles. Some sort of highlights of those 94 cars. I picked this one for you, Mike. We have 5 cars with manual transmissions.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I knew you were the host, so I wanted to throw that one in there.
Make sure that was there.
But for 2023, the new cars, let's talk about that. We bought 39 cars, at least as of today. When we're filming this, we might be able to squeak one more car in this year. But the breakout of that is we bought 10 EVs, 11 plug-in hybrids, 10 regular hybrids, and 8 gas cars.
Yep.
And out of those 39 cars, as of yesterday, we have 160,254 miles. Wow. This year, plus we're still driving some of the stuff that we've had before. So I was unable to put together a number for actual total miles driven this year. I thought about it for a minute, but made my head explode.
Well, we don't want that.
That's just too much math.
And then just some sort of additional numbers here. We rented 30 cars for manufacturers, so cars we didn't buy, but we brought in and got to experience some different trim levels and
maybe
things
did
like
a first
that.
drive or something.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And then lastly, with those 39 cars, we've done approximately 2,000 individual tests over the course of the year of all the different things that we test and evaluate.
Yeah.
So, bunch of numbers, bunch of math, and a lot of work.
Kind of to your manual transmission point there, by my math, at various points throughout 2023, these weren't all tested in 2023, but we had actually 7 vehicles. That's including the 2024 Mustang, of course, that we haven't even tested yet. And that's like more than I can ever remember since I've been here since 2016.
That's the Mike Monticello manual count. Yeah.
And you know what? We may never have that again because
it's quite possibly right.
So I just wanted to bring that up. But thanks for all those great stats. So with that, let's move on to our
Good
favorite
stuff.
and least favorite vehicles that we tested this year. This should be fun because we don't know our picks.
Correct.
So Mike, I'm going to start with you. What was your, and the caveat being that had to be a vehicle that, not that we had on site in 2023, but that was physically tested, went through our program in 2023. So that cut out one of my favorite cars I thought was going to pick. I'm like, oh,
they
yeah.
do.
So
We're spoiled.
Mike, let's start with you. What's your favorite vehicle we tested in 2023?
I'm going to go with the Honda Accord Hybrid Sport. I probably wouldn't buy the Sport version of it. I would pick one of the other trim levels of the hybrid, but it's an excellent powertrain, excellent car.
Tell us why you wouldn't pick the Sport. Is it because of the wheels?
Yeah, basically the wheel and tire. It's a little harsh. I would even maybe pick a Sport and go down the road of finding another set of wheels, something a little smaller. But you run into other issues when you start modifying the car. And Honda does make the hybrid in other trim levels. They've kind of done that work for you. So I would pick maybe like an EX or an LX, just hybrid.
Tell us a little bit about, because that Honda 2-motor hybrid system is just kicking butt. I don't know if we're allowed to say that on this family show, but it's just such a great hybrid system. Just tell us a little bit about that versus, say, a vehicle that doesn't have that 2-motor system.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super smooth. When you're riding around, we'll call it EV mode, just on electric power, absolutely silent, plenty of power for that vehicle. When the gasoline motor does kick on, it's seamless. You almost don't even know it. If you had the radio on and having a conversation, you probably wouldn't know what happened. It gets awesome gas mileage.
Yeah.
It's great on the highway. And it's just overall, it's a really nice car. The infotainment's great. It has real buttons that we love.
Yep.
It has a couple of downsides. The seats aren't the best. Some of our testers felt the seats left a little bit desired, but overall, I just think it's an awesome choice.
Yeah, I think you're right. Jen, what do you got for us?
So just to qualify, when I pick my favorite cars, when we do these segments, I pick one that is right for me and that I could actually afford. Like what would be in my cards if I had to pick a car? Say we lose our jobs tomorrow, and what would I consider? And for me, that is kind of in line with what Mike's saying, the Honda CR-V hybrid.
Yeah.
So 35 miles per gallon. There's just not a lot that this car doesn't do well. 26 miles per gallon was the regular CRV, so 9 miles per gallon more, a boost in power over the regular CRV. And to me, it's like a no-brainer car. Recommended out of the gate, because it's a Honda.
Right.
And
reliability-wise.
Yeah, reliability-wise. And it's not just the CRV already is a super high volume selling vehicle. I will not be alone, but that car, to me, again, I look at like big reach vehicles. Like, did I enjoy driving the BMW iX? Oh yeah, I did. But I can't afford an $88,000 car. So that car, to me, one of the best cars we had this year. It just does everything well.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you guys both picked the Honda hybrids. It has to do with so much, I think, with just the way the powertrain works, those simulated upshifts.
Yes.
To keep the, a CVT or eCVT, whatever the vehicle has, from going, doing the high revving thing. The Honda hybrids do a much better job driving more like a normal car, right? I think that's a big part of it.
I have always said, I love hybrids, but I don't want to know I'm in one.
Yeah.
I don't want to be reminded all the time that I'm in one.
I got to be honest, I'm surprised I thought you'd be thrown off because the Ford Flex hasn't been in production for a while and we didn't test the Kia Sorento. So I'm like, how's she going to pick a car? Those are her two favorite cars.
I know.
So along the lines with what you guys, I pretty much mimicked what you guys did. I also went with a very practical choice, and that is the Nissan Z.
Yeah. Surprise. Yeah.
So is it practical? Heck no.
Yep. Is
it
fun?
Comfortable?
Not so much.
Does it have a quiet cabin?
Not really.
Is it easy to get in and out of?
That's what I was going to say.
But it's so darn fun to drive.
Yeah.
It's got that manual transmission.
There you go.
6-speed manual. And, this is the kind of car that you'll make up a reason to go for a drive, right? And hopefully the reason is to go drive a really curvy road, or you'll seek out a curvy road, because we're talking about it's really all about the engine.
Yep.
400 horsepower, 3-liter twin turbo V6. It's just so awesome. And when you look at kind of bang for the buck, when you look at the fact that the base Nissan Z comes in not just below the Toyota Supra and its Turbo 6, but it comes in, it's even cost less than the Supra with the Turbo 4-cylinder.
Affordable fun.
Yeah. So look, it's not perfect. The ride is pretty stiff, and that's not even what bothers me. What bothers me is the boomy cabin. The cabin's just really loud, and the seats aren't great for me. But I love driving it, and to me, that's what it's all about. And I also love looking at it. I think it's a pretty.
It has to be your weekend car.
Yeah.
You can buy one.
Yeah. Okay. So now, Jen, let's go to you. Least favorite vehicle of 2023.
Okay, this was easy for me.
Oh.
In that, what car do I don't really want it, and that's to
Nissan
me.
Z.
No, not the Nissan Z. I actually wouldn't try. So for me, the Rivian R1S. Just so much money for not a very satisfying car for me. Very low overall score. Oddly, owner satisfaction for this car is very high. It's like a 5 out of 5. Like, people who have it love it, but it is not a car for me. The regen and that whole operation, it's just undrivable for me for comfort.
Sort of nauseating almost.
It's sort of nauseating. As a driver, never experienced that.
Because you have to be so careful with the accelerator pedal, right? When you're coming back off.
Yes, you cannot come off, or you're lurching forward. Your insides are unsettled, to Mike's point. And even worse than the R1T, which I actually found some surprise and delight in that it was a pickup. It had that cool tunnel. It had the power tunnel cover, like things like that made it a cool pickup. You don't get that in the R1S. It's, to me, even lesser than the R1T. Not particularly reliable, though that hopefully will change over time. But for me, this year, the R1S.
I totally agree that, the pickup seemed like it just offered more neat features.
Yeah.
But also, and you mentioned the reliability, the predicted reliability is low, but the owners apparently don't care.
No.
They love them so much.
They love, and again, I didn't even get into the screen and the controls and all of that. Right. To me, it's really the driving. Right. That bothers you. Bothers me.
Right. Okay. What about you, Mike?
So this was a difficult one for me. There's a few cars in our fleet that I don't really love. But I picked this particular one because I spent a rough couple of days in a row with it, in some of our testing.
Okay.
And this is the Alfa Romeo Tonale.
Okay.
And I don't even know where to begin. There's not a lot of positives I can personally say about it. It's definitely a little stylish and things like that, but you can get the Hornet for a whole lot less.
The Dodge Hornet, yeah.
Very similar. So I think you're overpaying for something else that exists somewhere else at a much better price. Granted, you can get different drivetrains between the two as well, but it's not a particularly great at anything. And riding around EV mode is okay, but then the gas motor sometimes cuts in for a couple of seconds, and if that happens mid-corner, you go from rear-wheel drive to front-wheel drive, and it upsets the vehicle.
Yeah.
Not awesome on the highway. It's loud. It's kind of rough, and it's got a lot of modes that they don't really tell you what they do. When you put in sport mode, it will sort of recharge itself. So it's in a charging mode, and you can recharge sort of that EV portion of the battery.
Yeah. Did you mention that it's a plug-in hybrid? I can't remember.
So I don't think I did, but it is a plug-in hybrid,
Right.
which on the surface is kind of cool. And we're that's kind of become the new thing, and we're learning about those.
Yep.
And that's actually one of the reasons why I had to spend a couple of days in this. We were sort of doing some experimental testing, trying to figure out exactly what we needed to test on these plug-in cars, these plug-in hybrids. And so I had to kind of go through a couple of tanks of fuel and go through all the modes. And driving it in its charging mode, where it will charge itself, the fuel economy is atrocious. I don't want to put like real numbers out there in the world, but it's a huge percentage less than what it is just driving it like in regular hybrid mode.
Right.
So I just sort of question as to why. Why does the vehicle exist? It's kind of pricey. There's a very similar vehicle out there on the road with it. And just functionally in the interior, it's just sort of worse overall than the Hornet.
And both the Hornet and the Tonale are based on a very old platform. So I think that's part of the problem right there.
And you see it. Yeah, you feel
it.
it.
And the only thing I will add, we talk about reliability. I'm our mechanic here, so I deal with a lot of that stuff. They know me by name at the local Maserati and Alfa dealership. I walk in, and they're just like, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?"
There's Mike again.
There you go.
And we only have one of each. And we have some brands with 8 and 9, and they don't know me by name there. So
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's a great reliability verdict. The Mike Crossan reliability verdict. I think your point too of you had to live with it for a while because you were evaluating it. I do think once the shiny wears off, the newness wears off. And I think the same about the R1S, though that's not what our numbers are telling us. But once you live with something for a while, though things can become more disappointing than if you're just a one-off.
So familiarity breeds contempt with some vehicles.
With some, and sometimes familiarity brings great joy, but it can work both ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for me, my least favorite vehicle, and this actually ties in with your favorite vehicles. You guys are proving my point with your favorite vehicles to my least favorite, which is my least favorite driving vehicle was the Toyota Prius.
Yeah.
And there's numerous reasons for that, but basically I don't like driving it. I mean, I just don't enjoy driving it at all. Yes, it gets fantastic fuel economy. Actually pretty amazing fuel economy considering that this one we bought is all-wheel drive. And it was almost matched the previous one with front-wheel drive, and it weighs like 230 pounds more, right?
Yeah.
75 more horsepower than before.
Yeah.
It's like considerably quicker than the last Prius.
Yep.
It handles better. No question it handles better, but it's just not enjoyable to drive. And it's really, because it has an electronic continuously variable transmission, it doesn't operate the way that the Hondas do.
Right.
And so you get, we talk about this drone or whatever. It's basically, it allows the high revs. So even moderate acceleration. And this is not a kind sounding engine at all, right? It's like a raspy groan.
Not a pleasure
It doesn't do the simulated upshifts.
Yep.
It sounds like it's working hard even when it isn't working hard, which is annoying. My girlfriend was like, this thing feels really slow. And it's like, no, it's just revving really high for no reason, right? Ride significantly firmer than before.
Yeah.
Okay. Our XLE, 19-inch wheels and tires.
Yeah, it
Why
should be
would
on
a
17s.
Prius?
Yeah.
No Prius should have 19-inch wheels and tires. Actually, only the base LE you can get 17s on. The two higher trims, you have to get the 19s. Our last Prius had 15s.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's really hurting the ride. The cabin is noisier. Outward visibility is terrible.
It looks better. It
looks
cooler.
way better.
Looks way better.
I think it looks fantastic.
There you go.
But it has these long sloping windshield pillars that you're constantly.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a
that's a problem.
safety issue?
Yeah.
That's a safety issue. I'm sorry. It's super low to the ground. It's hard to get in and out. Rear seat is less comfortable.
Yeah.
And there's less cargo room. And to prove the point, it actually lost several points in its road test score over the last Prius.
Right.
So overall, it's a worse car than before. And,
Yep.
and like I said, I don't enjoy driving it
Right.
at all. Okay, so that's enough about our least favorite stuff. Let's talk about more positive things. And Mike, I'm going to go to you first. What are you looking forward to automotive-wise for 2024?
Sure. I mean, obviously EVs were a big thing in 2023, and I'm curious to see what happens there. There was a massive push. All these auto manufacturers rolled out a bunch of cars. Some are pretty good. Some are, quirky and things like that. We have all the infrastructure issues, but then there's things happening, right? Like most of these manufacturers are going to move over to the Tesla plug. That's going to be super interesting. So I want to see what happens there. Plus we have all these plug-in hybrids that are coming out. So I just want to see if that really, really heavy EV push continues and just sort of what happens with their sales. Beginning of the year, I would go to a lot of dealerships for whatever reasons, and there weren't a lot of cars at all on the lot. Now there's a bunch of cars on the lot, particularly EVs.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if they're just showing up or if they are not really selling them as fast as they had thought or some combination thereof. So really, I just want to see what happens with the EVs.
Yeah, totally agree. That's a great point. What about you, Jen?
Well, I'm going to read you verbatim. I'm interested in how the addition of so many EVs and PHEVs play out in the market.
That's called plagiarism. You're not supposed to copy
We're
people's
mind
notes.
meld. What becomes their normal usage? What happens? Are they really only a viable, really good car for where it's warm? What happens to components like tires?
Absolutely.
And has this combination of speed, torque, and mass, what's that mean from a safety perspective? Have those EVs gone too far in terms of the safety realm? So different aspects, but yes,
And
what
reliability
happens?
is out there on these too. Just
Yeah.
general,
Right.
there's a lot of software stuff. I'll throw this one out there. We've had a bunch of EVs. We have 27 now. I forgot the number
Right.
of total EVs we've had ever. I did count that out. I just forgot to add it here. Going all the way back to the original Leaf. But we just had to have our first battery work done on an EV. It's like a 3.5-year-old vehicle. It's got 20-something thousand miles on it, but we did have to have a battery taken out and some cells in it replaced. Now, granted, we've had a pretty good run there, but as these cars age, is this a one-off or is this
Right.
going to be more indicative of what we see? So I think reliability is going to be a big question mark, which we might not answer next year, but we might get a better picture.
We're going to have an interesting picture, though, because we've held them for a lot of these new tests. What happens when we sell them? What is the market going to bear when we get rid of some of these
Especially
vehicles?
when there's new models of basically the same thing on the lot. So
Yeah. All great points. And shocker, I'm also, I want it to be, can we beat, this past year's total of manual transmission vehicles for 2024? But I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. So I'm interested as well. And look, EVs are coming. It looks like whether you want them to or not, at least for now anyway, we don't know what's going to happen down the road. But because they're coming, and that's, we're going to test what people, what the manufacturers are putting out there. We need to tell people whether they're good to drive or not. There's a truckload of EVs coming. And guess what? A lot of them are trucks.
Yeah.
We're going to have a
Starting
Tesla
with
Cybertruck soon.
Cybertruck,
I don't want to look at it, but I really want to drive it.
Yeah. People around you will want to look at
the
it.
Ram 1500 Rev, the Chevy Silverado EV, and then there's also just vehicles like the Kia EV9 SUV. I'm curious to drive that. The Fisker Ocean, the VinFast, the VF8 and the VF9. There's a lot of cool vehicles, and a lot of them we're going to buy and test. So we've got a lot of interesting stuff coming. All right, well, let's move now to audience questions of the week. Don't forget to send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. But we do have a question from Steven from Bristow, Virginia. After listening to your recent episode on the Toyota Prius Prime and thinking about your previous All Things About EVs show, I observed you never mentioned anything about whether plug-in hybrid electric vehicles can take advantage of regenerative braking to extend range like hybrids. So do they? So I'm going to throw this to you, Professor Mike Crossan. I say that because, for one thing, you are a wealth of information, but also you used to teach shop. Was it shop in high school?
I taught high school automotive shop for a while, yes.
So you are now Professor Crossan.
We got it.
So talk to us about PHEVs and regen braking.
Sure. They absolutely do, right? That's just a thing. Regular hybrids have it for that matter too. That's one of the ways that you just recharge that battery pack. They're all a little bit different though, at least in the cars that we've purchased so far. Some of them, it is adjustable. Some of them kind of have paddles the way we've seen in EVs and things like that. Some of them don't. It just is what it is. One thing to keep in mind on these plug-in hybrid electric vehicles is that you have one big battery for the high voltage stuff, but you almost want to think of it as two batteries. They partition it. So part of it is purely for just EV operation. The other part is for like regular hybrid operation once you've used up the 20 or 30 miles of EV range that you get, maybe at the start. that regenerative braking is really more so going to be useful for when you're in hybrid mode. Just, bringing that battery back up a few more percent so you get that extra boost. I was in a couple of our vehicles yesterday out on the track, and yes, you can regen brake them down. I was doing maybe braking half the distance of our straightaway, and yeah, you might see a mile go put back on, even in EV mode, but it goes away instantly as soon as you get back on the throttle. So that big portion of the battery is still big enough that you need to plug it in to utilize that portion. But under regular kind of hybrid operation, absolutely they have regen, and it does help, kind of extend that hybrid operation.
Right. And this is why we call him the professor.
Yes, the professor.
And Jen, just since we're talking about PHEVs, and we've recently started really going deep on the PHEVs, which we weren't before, but we kind of switched things around. We're like, we need to know more about these vehicles because maybe people should be buying these. There's some really neat stuff with them. Complicated, but neat. Tell us about what the different things you can do with a PHEV.
And again, it's about the charging and how you can tailor, select, maybe that's the right word, to do different modes. So charge sustaining mode, where you can say, I don't want to use my battery right now because I can't imagine the scenario, but you're on the highway, for example, and you're not going to have a charger, but you want to use electric the next day.
Or you're on the highway and you're going to end up in a city.
Right.
Absolutely.
So you can pick to say, don't use my electric portion of that battery right now, or charge depleting mode, which is use it up as it will. And I've become a bit of this is a tremendous bridge. PHEV, plug-in hybrids are a great bridge to the EV world. I think of somebody like my mom who doesn't really go very far. She decided she goes to the supermarket every day. What a great option for them, be it charge depleting, charge sustaining. But I just think there's a lot we're still learning about PHEVs.
Right. And to regen braking, though, it's not game changing in the way that you're going to be like seeing you're using aggressive regenerative braking mode. You're going to be seeing all this mileage, your predicted range go up. That's not going to happen. You're just not wasting energy. You're sending some energy. You're optimizing
maximum efficiency
rather than not using, recouping any of that energy with regular friction brakes. So there is some benefits to them for sure, but it's not like you're going to be suddenly super efficient. Not to mention the fact slowing down is inefficient, right? Anytime you slow down, that is inefficiency. So there's a time and a place for regen braking.
Keep going fast. Is that the verdict? Go ahead, Mike.
I would say I'm a gauge watcher when I drive cars.
Yeah.
And I like in the Fords, they have that brake coach.
Yes.
Now, I don't feel as though I need it, but I love it when it says 100%.
Feels so good.
It's just a game, basically.
Yeah.
And I like the accolades, even when the instrument cluster is giving them to me.
So is regenerative braking a convenience feature more for one-pedal driving? To me,
it's a great
potentially.
But also, and you're the mechanic professor, it has the benefit of potentially saving some wear and tear on your brake pads and rotors, correct?
Yeah, you're definitely going to use less brakes.
Right.
But especially where we live, and anybody who lives places where it snows and there's salt, so the salt belt, you still might have to replace those brakes even before you wear them out. They start to rust. Gotcha. The pad material starts to separate, calipers freeze up. So it's not maybe, you're going to have to do brakes at some point, I guess is what I'm saying. You're not going to go forever on your original set of brake pads unless maybe you live somewhere with awesome weather.
Right.
But
it's like your manual. Do you downshift or do you brake?
I downshift.
Well, there you go. So do I. Yeah. But do you regen or do you brake?
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to another question. This comes from Bob from Buffalo, New York. That's where my mom was born and raised. Over the years, CR has tested and discussed the differences in how various all-wheel drive systems perform in ice, snow, and wet conditions. I recall there are differences in various mechanically connected all-wheel drive systems, and there is usually an even greater difference with some hybrids. For example, a Toyota RAV4, where rear wheels are independently driven with an electric motor. Could you please comment on EV all-wheel drive systems where the rear and front wheels are independently driven with two motors, sometimes three or four? Since electric motors have instant torque, does that create an additional problem relative to gas-powered vehicles? Living in Buffalo in winter, handling is important to me. So we're going to throw it back to the professor.
Yeah. So Bob, thank you for the question. And that's a really well thought out question. And, certainly we get snow here, or at least sometimes we get snow here. Last winter, we didn't really get any.
We wish for snow here.
Yeah. So we're actually hoping this winter, some of us were talking about it earlier today, that even if we have to come in at like midnight, we want to line up all these cars and really experience them in some snow. Last winter, I did get to drive a couple of the EVs in some snow when I was up in Massachusetts. Regenerative braking, you usually have it on to some degree because a lot of times you're doing the one pedal drive. All the owner's manuals tell you not to use strong regen in slippery conditions, so snow and even down to rain. I did try stopping the EV6, basically full regen down a moderate hill, and it sort of locked up and slid a little bit, but then it sorted itself out.
Right.
So basically, I equated it to if you just stomped on the brake pedal, you're going to slide a little bit, and then the ABS system is going to sort it out and kind of keep the tires rolling a little bit. But as far as one motor, two motor, however many motors you have, each motor isn't out there on their own, kind of running their own program, doing their own thing. There is a module that is kind of overwatching all of those. Yeah. So it's going to only apply power and do regen in such ways that traction basically allows. These vehicles are heavy, which in some cases helps with traction, right? You just sort of have more pulling down, a little more contact patch, things like that. You might be able to cut through the snow a little better. So you're not like up floating on that crusty snow layer. You can actually get down to the pavement. That could be helpful. But, if you're stuck or trying to go up a hill that's icy and snowy, you also now have all that weight like holding you back. So again, it's sort of like a seesaw, right? You get a benefit on one side and, maybe it hurts you on a little bit on the other side. The RAV4, the hybrids, and obviously these plug-in hybrids, Toyota is basically doing gas motor up front, electric motor in the back, like the Alpha that I was hating on a few minutes ago. We have a plug-in hybrid Volvo that does the same kind of setup, and it's a really good way to do it engineering-wise and packaging-wise. It's really smart. It utilizes a lot of space and things like that. Helps the weight distribution of the vehicle. You get to throw some extra weight out back for people who like to go, take an SUV through some corners and stuff like that. Looking at you, Mike.
Looking at you, Mike.
As far as the instant torque goes, I suppose you have the ability to obliterate, the tires off this thing in any sort of condition, but they seem to do a decent job in the dry and the wet. Traction control and stability control and everything, reins that in. But certainly if you're driving one of these things, just be aware that you do have less traction and you are going to want to be a little smoother on it. A lot of these have modes. So again, you probably want to go out of sport mode, put it in snow mode or a comfort mode is going to help. And I've specifically avoided talking about tires.
I knew it was coming.
So
you have to.
I think the last podcast I was on basically had a similar all-wheel drive question. I basically just said buy good tires.
Yeah.
And of course, that is a big part of this too, right? If I lived in Buffalo, I absolutely would buy a separate set of snow tires. Yep. If you live somewhere with maybe a more mild winter, just a really good all-season tire that's in good shape is probably enough. But it's everything's a combination, right? There's not just one answer for everything. So
because if you think about it, a couple things. First, we're more to come, right? Because we're hopefully going to do some actual EV all-wheel drive testing this winter, hopefully. Right.
We want to
some level of evaluation, experience the differences.
We haven't designed any tests at this point, but it's something that
at least going to fiddle around with it, so we can see how different they are from each other. And two, forward traction is one thing. Stopping that has to do with all-wheel drive systems. Right. All-wheel drive system has nothing to do with slowing down, and that's where your tires. And I know, Jen, you're in charge of the tire program, so winter tires are hugely important in terms of just slowing down, if nothing else.
The other element, again, independent of the all-wheel drive, is I don't think I have experienced wheel spin quite so often as when we've had these EVs and PHEVs, even in the wet. Just that initial, I think we're all going to have to learn to tickle the, not gas pedal, but accelerator pedal a little more gingerly when it's got OE tires. Again, all bets are off, no matter how many independent electric motors, engine all-wheel drives, if there's no traction. So,
and that's a good point on tires too. A lot of these EVs are coming with summer tires on them. Right. Sold in Connecticut, an all-wheel drive vehicle with like a summer sport tire. Yeah. And that's due to rolling resistance and the fact that these cars are really fast and they need the grip and all that kind of stuff.
Optimizing range,
but you could be in for a rude awakening. You buy this car, you drive it for 6 months, it snows, and you might not really go anywhere.
Right. All right. Well, great question, Bob. We'll
scroll back to how these EVs play out in the market. There you go. Yeah. How are they going to play out in Buffalo?
Yeah, exactly. That's going to do it for this episode. If you want to learn more about the topics and the vehicles that we talked about, you can click on the links in the show notes. Don't forget to send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. We want to thank all of our loyal viewers and listeners for staying with us for all these years. and let you know that we are definitely going to be doing this all through 2024 and hopefully for years down the road. So stay with us here at the podcast. We love bringing it to you. So
Happy New Year.
Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see y'all next year.